all we're doing is using our craft. We're using the tools in our toolbox to
curatorial presentation.
Yep, in order to present it to an audience where they get to determine. And they might take a second look at it where they wouldn't have before, but the art doesn't happen until they engage.
Welcome to the Red, Green, Blue podcast.
All right, welcome to the RGB podcast. Remember to like and subscribe because I never say that, and it makes a big difference because I thought it'd be nice by not saying it, but you don't do it unless I say it. So like and subscribe because it makes my assistant crazy happy when it does. Anyway, also, this is our first commercially sponsored podcast. This is brought to you by the Red Finch Lab for all your analog photography needs. You can get film processed there at great rates. Go to redfinchlabs.com. Lab.com, not plural. Redfinchlab.com. Oh gosh, are we going to get paid? Anyway, so here we are with Laura Howe, who is has many years of experience in art, and she's a curator at a major museum, oversees an extensive collection, and has an acquisition budget and deals with a lot of artists, has taught art history for a long time. And we're really excited to hear her perspective on art because artists usually talk to themselves and ignore curators. But if you've ever actually done a show, you know that curators are a huge part of it. And they actually run the art world. Like for our movie audience, curators are kind of like the producers and studio heads of like a director of a museum is to a studio head, as a producer is to a curator. That's actually a pretty direct parallel. And so they really they have all the power, they control all the strings, and we're excited to hear her opinions. And also, I have an MFA who also do film, but I actually do visual art as well. So I have lots of feelings, as we had when our pre-conversation. A little too animated maybe. But so anyway, my first question to you, Laura, is what do you feel is the difference between an illustrator and an artist?
Well, first, pleasure to be here. It's honor to be described as super powerful. So
you are powerful.
Nice and buttered up coming into here.
Well, no, you are. And again, you have no idea. Like, I mean, artists, 99% of artists, their first and last show is their BFA final show.
Sure.
And so if you actually get to a point where actually a curator at a museum is even looking at your work, you're a rare breed. And then if you actually acquire, in a way, you kind of justify people's whole life. I mean, people sacrifice and work so hard, and then they actually get something in a permanent collection. It's like, wow.
Well, I'll just say on this end, that feels overwhelming as a description. So I just got to do my job the best I can to collect things as fits an institution's purpose. Yeah. As far as artist and illustrator goes, I kind of have some disdain when someone describes those as two different things. This is an artist, that one's an illustrator.
No, it's a pejorative. Illustrator is a pejorative. It's kind of like saying your exhibit is fun. If someone says, wow, that's some great illustrations, ooh, you were just burned.
Fair enough. But I think that's usually a lack of understanding of the art world. I think you have several different ways to be artists. There's lots of different genres of art, and I would just put illustration as one of those genres. And so you're going to have a different path of training. You're going to have different goals that are going to come out of it. But you're trying to create something that's going to help explicate whatever you're illustrating. I will find in my work, the illustrators I work with tend to be really strong at composition, about composing a scene. There are a lot of artists I interact with who can do a single figure or two figures really, really well. But they have a hard time. So if you're working in a figural tradition. Handling lots of different figures is a challenge and often a rare breed. My illustrators can...
Shout out to Bruegel.
Yeah, that's right. But the illustrators usually can handle it better because they've kind of trained in that composition. So I would just classify illustration as a genre of art.
Well, I mean, I feel the term and where the pejorative comes from is, are you coming up with your own ideas or are you illustrating somebody else's?
I think it's just a different challenge, right? If you're illustrating someone else's, it's coming. I don't know necessarily in art that it has to be the pure creativity of the genesis of an idea and bringing it forward. Art has different roles and different purposes and all different genres. And maybe it's that I oversee a collection that takes part in kind of global art traditions.
Yeah.
I think that idea of just kind of a genius on their own in a studio is a particularly Western idea, and it's a relatively recent Western idea. So I think illustration might have a different purpose. You're right. It is sometimes dependent on text. It's dependent on some other purpose, but I think creating something that fulfills that purpose is a legitimate art form.
Yeah, I guess well, of course it's funny because of course, like, what is it like? Well, Michelangelo illustrated the Sistine Chapel, right? Is he an illustrator? And he was working on commission, blah blah blah. Everyone knows that story. There's a movie about it starring Charlton Heston. If you're interested, don't think how historical accurate it is, but whatever.
Yep, I've seen it.
You have, yeah, no, it's I haven't. I've seen part of it, but yeah. Anyway, I guess it's like how much of you gets in there though. This is a thing like negotiating like checks and who controls what. And there's a great movie called The Square where there's a performance piece done by an artist and he acts like a monkey in front of all the patrons. And I just love that scene because in a way patrons view artists as monkeys who, because they pay them to do a job that entertains them. There you go.
As a patron, that feels pejorative.
Well, sorry. No, but that coincidentally, that's an interesting thing though. You may and that there's and in the scene, it's also kind of like it ends with him attacking a patron while he's in character as a monkey. Yeah. And it's because there really is kind of because artists are so dependent on patrons and people who pay the checks, they actually kind of hate them. I'm just saying. Oh, it's like a double-edged sword. You need them and you hate them, and you love them, but you hate them because you need them. And so that's a complicated thing, right?
I think Julius was really mad I think Michelangelo was mad at Julius for most of the time.
See, exactly. Sure.
That's not a surprise to me.
No, it's not a surprise, but I think it is. Because partially, even the audience, like donors to the museum, and it's such an elaborate network. The artist has a elaborate thing. Like I was friends with a woman, leave off names, I make this anyway, a major ballet troupe who was a dancer in it, and she was just promoted from the youth to the main youth group to the main group. Super prestigious move just to be in this group. It was such a major ballet troupe. And I asked her how do you get promoted? Just in the I would always, when we were hanging out, I would always say oh, how was practice? Even though it's an art, it's like rehearsal, but I called it practice because it seemed like she was an athlete. It's kind of like dating an athlete. Yeah. But anyway, she said, well, it's really kind of it's not kind of complicated. You'd be surprised how much the donors say about who gets promoted in the troupe. And so when there's a donor luncheon, you have to be really, really nice. So to hope they recommend you to the choreographer and stuff.
Sure.
And so again, donors and stuff. And that's a weird relationship because you think it would just be well, who's the best dancer? Right. So that goes to performance art. So anyway, but back to the illustrator thing. I think if you call someone an illustrator, you're saying there's nothing of you, you're illustrating something else. And then there's an artist is that it's you. And there's a line between probably every work, but that's why it's viewed as a pejorative. Because the illustration is saying if you're and I've done this, if my job is to illustrate an article in Fortune magazine, if I don't do in fact, this actually happened to me. If I don't do pretty closely what they say, I get a call the next morning saying, why didn't you photograph it this way?
Sure.
And I'm well, I sent you that photo because I want to. I've actually pulled where I just send the photo I want, even though I know the photo they're looking for, because I photographed a lot of rural America. And whatever it is, magazines always want derogatory photos of rural Americans. So I would not send those.
Right.
And they'd be but wait a minute, we're looking for them looking really pathetic. I'm
that's not what they
I'm sorry, I'm not sending that.
Sure.
And it's not, but yeah, no, it's always a problem for them. But see, that's me asserting when they're expecting, the reporter and the magazine editor is expecting an illustration for their view of how the story should be.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is the difference. And can you see what I'm saying there?
Oh, I can see what you're saying. I think it has a definition of what art is that I don't subscribe to. And I might be biased in this because of who I am, because I'm not creating the works, that I'm part of a different side of it. I'm an art fan by profession, but as you pointed out at the beginning, I'm also one that I'm selecting the art that I think fulfills this purpose, and I'm funding it. So I think the idea that an artist is on your own and exists and is kind of this work that doesn't involve any context is something I don't agree with. I think at the very least, art has an audience, and I think the interaction between a work and the audience is where art happens. And so how complicated does that context? So I think context matters a lot and in declaring something art or not. And so how complicated does the context get? Maybe it involves a patron, maybe it involves a purpose, maybe it involves a show, maybe it involves a building, maybe it involves all these things that stick to the work itself. And so it never exists in solo. And so I think because an illustrator has a specific patron who's
got a goal.
Yes, that has a goal or is offering opinions or there's some sort of feedback. I don't think just because that is part of the context negates it as a work of art.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's how heavy it is. I mean, what it comes down to, and this leads to our next thing, is whether it's the artist is craftsman who's using his craft ability to execute a patron's or commissioner's ideas, or if the artist is the idea who uses his craft to make his idea.
Sure.
And so if the art is the craft, then of course the craft is the art. But if the art is the idea, the artist has to be somehow invested into the idea. Sure. Or even if it's like a patron's I don't know. It's funny. I mean, this is the Renaissance to a T, right? They were Michelangelo was really into he would break into the Roman palaces and copy their work and, be like, oh, this is the best. But he needed to do pictures of Christ. And so he just made Jesus look like Zeus or whatever,
sure.
So, I mean, that's like a combining of goals.
Right.
But where am I going with this? Anyway, whether it's the idea or the craft. And so that's my next question, because these are tied. What do you think of the role of craft is in art?
Sure. I think I'm going to go back to what I just said that maybe we disagree on, but
we can disagree.
It gets down, and this is,
no, it's fine. Just so you know, this is a big, for our film audience, because that's most of our audience, this is a big discussion in art. It applies to film too, because film is so, the craftsmen are very separate than the people. The screenwriter doesn't shoot the movie.
Yes.
And so craft and ideas are very much separated. Actor, screenwriter, director are very independent from a lot of the other parts in the movie.
Right.
But then they can be involved in it. And the craft of filmmaking is so incredibly complicated. Virtually nobody can do all parts.
Right.
And so there is this relationship happening in film, but it's just not discussed as much because of the logistics.
Sure.
Like nobody expects Steven Spielberg to be an amazing cinematographer.
Right.
And nobody expects Woody Allen to even know how to operate a camera.
Right.
But he's still a master of the medium, even though you could say, in fact, even Woody Allen says, he's like, I don't know anything about cameras. I don't know anything about how a film's made. I think you need to take off the lens cap. Yeah. Like that's his joke. But he's still a master filmmaker.
Yeah.
So anyway, but in visual art, this is a big discussion. I would say my view is probably the more mainstream view. And your view is, I mean, going out on a limb, and I respect you for that.
Well, I think it's probably, I think it's probably revealing my bias of who I am as an art historian and an art curator.
Yeah.
But I do think as you kind of look at
what's
modernism.
your favorite art period?
Oh, that was the worst question ever.
Sorry, go on. So going through modernism, but you're curator.
If we're looking through modernism to postmodernism, I believe really strongly in context and audience. And where art occurs, I don't think it's necessarily the thing that gets created. I don't think art happens unless there's an audience and there's an interaction. So I guess if I were to define what I think art is, it's a a meaning-making experience between an audience and an object. So the art is the interaction between the two. And so what role does craft play in that? I think craft becomes a tool to create meaning. I think if something meaning-making experience happens, then art is there. And so craft and different trainings and different skills that the artist will acquire, usually that leads to them being better successful at creating meaning between an object and a viewer. So, and I think different disciplines and different genres, study is more important than others. But if, for example, if an audience looks at a figural painting and says that anatomy's wrong, the rules of a figural painting is that you should know your anatomy.
Yeah.
So there becomes training and skill that goes into making that happen. As well, alluding to a conversation before, do photographers, can you grab your iPhone and shoot pictures?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And can any person maybe land on something amazing? Possibly.
Well, photography killed craft. I mean, this is a debate about the meaning of photography, because photography killed craft and painting.
But we all have pretty fantastic phones.
And taking pictures easy. Even back in the days in film, it's not that hard.
Yep, and so now that's why iPhones. We all have. I've got 3 lenses on it. You know what
amazing,
I mean? I've got quite a bit of.
So
technology.
It's the quality of photo you take. It's not the craft of the photography.
Is it possible that me, who did no training as a photographer, could land on something great? It's possible.
No, actually, not really.
But Mark Hedengren, can you predictably come up with something fantastic that's going to create an object for which viewers can engage in?
Well,
because you've honed your craft.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've honed my vision, but I can tell you, I do the exact same thing I did when I was 12, or anybody does. I push a button. I point a camera and push a button.
You do more than point a camera and push a button.
No,
that's not true. You're determining the angle from which you have it. You're composing
I point a camera and I push a button.
But you know about composition and you know how to scene and you know how to make, as you're looking, you know which is going to help.
That's not really like craft. I mean, that's vision. It's not craft, but it's all vision.
It's still part of your training.
Well, I mean, especially like working between movies and working between still photography. I remember when I first started doing film, film is so much more difficult in the craft end than photography, and even equipment wise, it's just exhausting.
Yep.
And but again, it's just kind of, it goes down to vision, you know. So, but yeah, vision and craft, and again, and. Don't get mad at me, Red Finch Labs. But I'm a fan of analog film. And this was a discussion that actually happened in photography between the transition between film and digital. I've met photographers it feels very, very important to know all the chemistry involved in filmmaking and in developing film. And there's a wonderful look to film. And certainly I use a film camera. Where is it? Kaylee, where did I put that film camera? Oh. Can you hand that to me?
Yeah.
So anyway, this is my main camera right now. It's a Rolleiflex. It's gorgeous. It's probably harder to use than like an iPhone, but I don't think it's it's not that much harder to use. I could teach anybody how to operate this camera probably in 10 minutes. But you're right. Using it consistently is kind of hard. And shooting chemical film is more difficult than shooting digital because you have to. There's not like a computer figuring things out for you. So you kind of have to just get a feel for how the light is and stuff.
Sure.
But again, I don't necessarily really assign that to craft. But see, and this is where this discussion happened. I mean, that's why in painting, art schools all changed as after the invention of photography. So, I mean, that's why, it's interesting in the medium.
Changed a little bit, right? Because I think for a long time, at least in Western art styles that descend from the Renaissance, they were trying to approximate nature so fast. And then take a picture and you approximated nature so quickly.
Exactly.
And so the purpose of what they were trying to accomplish, how they created meaning, what a viewer expected, that shifted the art world.
Yeah, no, it did. Anyway, so we can talk about craft and vision all day long. But like your iPhone, I can take a great picture of iPhones. Weirdly, I've taken pictures with my iPhone that I've included in bodies of work because it's the camera I had with me and it fit.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I guess this will get by. It's not like it's like, and again, it's like a main difference between a camera like this and your iPhone is kind of the level of control you have.
Yeah.
Whereas like the iPhone makes a lot of decisions for you. And again, it's for the objective gain, like a technically correct photograph. I mean, of course, autofocus being the most obvious. But yeah.
Well, and I think, we're kind of just defining like craft as technician, right? Knowing how to use the camera.
See that? Yeah.
But
I don't think that's craft.
Again, I would argue that like...
Well, knowing how to use a paintbrush, how's it? Like how to paint an eyeball. That's a hard craft thing to do.
Right. Those are things that you go and often require going to school. How to compose a scene, how to draw attention to different things, how to
paint
use
hair.
colors.
That's a really hard one for people. That's something they struggle with for years even before you can get hair right.
Even color theory, like all of those things, especially if you're painting in an academic style.
Yeah.
Once you learn how to do those things, you're going to be able to create something that more reliably creates a meaning-making experience for that viewer.
Yeah.
But there's also other genres for which that kind of study isn't as necessary, but they have a different set of tools in their toolbox in order to create an object for which a viewer can engage. So I think maybe on a film set, and again, this is way out of my wheelhouse, so correct me if I'm going to say it wrong, but you've got all these people working on a film, and I assume you've got a director who's trying to coordinate all the efforts together.
An assistant director even. It's that hard.
That you are creating.
Assistant AD, baby. Or ADs, they're called.
Creating an object, but who gets to determine whether that's a work of art, who gets to determine whether a meaning-making experience happens is the viewers and whether they engage and whether something is successful. So I think all of the craft of everyone involved, as they put their tools in, are able to create something. And if they're at the top of their game, they're probably going to be better able to create something that's going to engage a viewer in a meaning-making
No, it's true.
experience.
I mean, it's whether in the end it's right. Well, it's the audience, but it's really the critics. I mean, at least in film, they're the ones who get to call art and not. And coincidentally,
but they're just viewers. Who
No,
say,
they are viewers.
Who
Yeah,
say
yeah.
snooty things, right?
Well, yeah. But I mean,
I'm an art fan by profession.
No, it's
you know
true.
What I mean?
Oh no, so am I. No, me. Like I said, like I really view like even like me as an artist. Like I'm just such a fan of art that if somebody's not making something I want to see, I have to make it. And honestly, in my research, if I find somebody else that made it, I'm like, sweet, I can just buy the book or like watch the movie. But I think like, and this is very interesting in the film context because like a lot of people who work in film wonder if they've ever made art. You know, because I mean, there's a lot of pressures, a lot of money at stake. I mean, even I'll leave his name off because, but a major actor was introducing a major reporter at a luncheon I was at, and he listed like 3 of his biggest movies that all happened within 2 years of each other. And he kind of looked around the audience like for approval. I'm like, this guy is like so big. He's like in the top 20 actors of all time. And I was just like, dude, you're still looking for like our approval? Like, man, like you've transcended the medium. Like you're as big as it gets in the medium. And again, it's because there are these commercial pressures, and this is scaled up to a bazillionth degree. Like in painting, like you just need money to eat and heating, I guess, so the paint doesn't freeze and a brush. But I think you with anyway, I think you can see but when a film is art as opposed to one is commercial, like just you have to watch a lot of stuff, and it takes a sophisticated viewer and a sophisticated viewer to see it. Like there's some movies that are so good, it's just so pure and it's just so amazing. You like just want to stand up and cheer. Yeah. But yeah, so it does ultimately come down to the audience. But I think you can see when it's like a vision is being executed rather than like, you know, Mission Impossible 7, which even Tom Cruise wouldn't call art.
Now, I don't want to say necessarily like whether it's successful with a viewer means that makes it art, because I think it's the meaning-making experience, right? And I think there's plenty of visual things that are very popular among an audience that I wouldn't call art because they're responding in a one-note sort of way. But if they're engaging in a meaning-making level, then that's where I would.
So whether
art.
like makes them realize something about their life, or like it's like changes their perspective on the world, not just, I mean, you know, like what's his name? Martin Scorsese significantly said These aren't movies. These are amusement park rides. This isn't filmed. This is an amusement park ride. And so, I mean, that would be the distinction. Like if whether it's just a good time or if it's like something meaningful.
Well, and deciding what a meaning-making experience is, but it might be challenging. I think there's maybe, if we're going to film, there's comedies that might be insightful and help people engage and get into the piece, and you know what I mean? And or someone, if an audience comes with who they are and where they are in the world, and some sort of comedy helps them in some sort of way. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it has to be this only genre, dramatic, sort of soulful sort of way. I think there's lots of ways, and I think the art might change depending on the viewer. So I get that I'm totally privileging the viewer in this
but also
calculus.
And also your role in an institution gives you the authority to call something art because it's art. The same way like the New York Museum of Modern Art, right?
Sure.
They, in a way, what they say is art because they're the New York Museum of Modern Art.
I get to put it on a pedestal, and I get to put a light on it, and I get to interpret it with a label. And I see that happen in my own work. I'll see something that I don't particularly love.
Oh, you want to talk about you as an artist?
No, let's not talk about me as an artist.
No, we could. That's an interesting
but a
question.
piece. But once we put it and we put a label on it and we light it, all of a sudden it becomes art, and we hereby dub the art, right? True. But I think really all we're doing is using our craft. We're using the tools in our toolbox to
curatorial presentation.
Yep, in order to present it to an audience where they get to determine, and they might take a second look at it where they wouldn't have before, but the art doesn't happen until they engage.
That's great. So what do you feel artists knew about their job that would make your life easier?
That would make my life easier.
Yeah, I'm wondering. You want good art. I mean, I think that's the thing artists, if they want to see good art, because that's why they're even in the field. If you show them good art, you make their day.
100%. What would make my life easier is I am a patron, right?
Yeah.
And I think, at least as far as the visual art worked up until the late 19th century, art did not happen unless there was a patron.
Yeah.
But then
they're so poor.
The gallery, the artists are still fairly poor.
No, but back then we made like $600 a year.
Yeah,
I mean, that was like just everybody. It was really, really poor. But anyway, cool.
If we go to the Renaissance, right, they categorized jobs, and artists were down as the less important guild. And so I think art was always this relationship between patron and artist.
Yeah.
After the 19th century, the gallery system erupts, where it enabled artists to create on their own and be geniuses in their solitary space, right? And present it. And then people went to that space to purchase art. So it wasn't a direct connection between the artist and the patron anymore. And I think there's an assumption now that is how art should work. Mm-hmm. And I will say there's plenty of that I think is excellent. And I think artists, because that system exists, they should feel free to take advantage, and they never have to talk to a patron ever if they want. And hopefully it'll come up on the scene of the patron, and they'll see. And there's plenty of art that I buy that I recognize that's just amazing. And I never even talked to the artist.
Yeah.
But there's also plenty of commissioned art in which I did. And I think that frustration with a patron makes sometimes things hard, and feedback.
Yeah.
Sometimes artists are really willing to roll with it. And I would argue they're still creating art, even though they're having to take into perspective patrons' insight. And there's some artists who are better at that than others.
Yeah.
But if that were recognized as part of the process, and the advantage working with the patron is you might have the platform of that patron, the money of that patron. There's a lot of good that can happen from being able to work with a patron.
Yeah.
It would make my life easier if that were sometimes understood. And I get that the patrons are the bad guys.
No, they're not the bad guys. No, they're big. They keep you going. They justify your whole existence. Well, and it's like, no, really, it's like they're really, really important. But there's like, again, it's like a give and take. I guess like ideally an artist will make what he wants to make. It will be good, and then it will find an audience. And then, but he won't. but he will be making what he wants to make. Like that's the artist's ideal. That's what they want to be.
And I don't fault that ideal. That is a beautiful, perfect world.
Yeah.
But sometimes for practical reasons, you might need more people in that equation. Because I'm one of the people who tries to worm my way into that equation.
Well, because you are that equation. Yeah.
that makes things easier. If the patron weren't always the bad guy.
No, the patron isn't the bad guy. I don't get off that story. The patron is the good guy, is the hero.
Yeah.
But I guess it's like the difference between the Pope and de Medici. I mean, that would be the difference. Cosimo de Medici was really just kind of like writing a lot of blank checks and whatever. A lot of good things happened. A lot of not good things happened, but a lot of great things happened.
Sure.
Whereas the Pope was like, no, I want this. So, yes. I mean, that's the Michelangelo. And Michelangelo was used to Cosimo de Medici, and that's why he was frustrated with the Pope, not being like Cosmo.
Well, and I think we have a lot of examples of that being frustrating, and I don't really want to fault artists because I get that that's frustrating. Yeah. But we got great stuff either way, and out of the funds of Julius, we got the Sistine Chapel,
great stuff happened,
and we got
the Sistine Chapel is like a world wonder in civilization. It's such an important thing. If you ever go see it, you're like, oh my goodness. And honestly, it's because first of all, doing something at that scale, you'd need a major patron to back you.
Yes.
I mean, whereas Cosmo probably could never even afford to do that.
Sure.
Or even have the venue. And then the other thing
Julius can afford it, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Cosimo de Medici, maybe Michelangelo himself never had the vision to think like, well, let's do something on such a scale.
Yeah.
And so that's, where the patron comes in.
Well, and I think sometimes, especially because artists do tend to want to be change makers and to shift and to push boundaries, that if you can get an institution on that side, working with them might be to your ultimate advantage, right? Having that platform might be helpful in your job to enable you to do more things on your own in the future.
Yeah, one also is just being easy to work with. That's the other thing, right? I mean, just being a good person and, just recognizing you're lucky to be in the position you are as an artist, and you're recognizing that you're working and that you're happy to be there.
Well, I think in all institutions, if you work hard and you're good to work with, I think those are two good keys to getting lots of places.
There we go. Well, what a wonderful conversation we've had.
Sure.
So, I mean, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, it was fantastic.
No, I thought it was fantastic.
I love talking with you, Mark.
Anytime. Whatever. You usually laugh and say, well, that was interesting, Mark. But that's all right. That's my goal.
I'll say it with a mic or not.
Better be interesting than boring.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks a lot. Thanks for coming, Laura. Good talking with you.
Good to
anyway, again, like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Enjoy more of this great podcast. Thanks for listening. Bye.